James Cameron's Avatar is re-released in theaters as Don't Worry Darling premieres, as well as the trailers for the next Netflix miniseries, film, and the next Disney animated film. I'm Darius Delsoin.
And I'm Joe Acierno. This is Cinema Unchained. Welcome to another episode of the one and only Cinema Unchained podcast. Now, as always, we have a fantastic lineup for you today. Lots to talk about. Now, before we get into the trailer for the next Disney animated movie, if you want more fun, honest, and engaging talks about movies, TV, and everything in between, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and hit the bell to get all notifications for new uploads, whether you're on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow our social media profiles that are listed in the description to stay updated as well. Now, before we dive into our experience seeing James Cameron's Avatar on the big screen this past weekend, the trailer for the next Disney animated film was released this past week. It's called Strange World. It seems to be a sci-fi adventure sort of film. A famous family of explorers is forced to put aside their differences as they embark on an adventure to a mysterious planet full of undiscovered and really surreal life forms. Now, it's strange. I'm sure that if you look back at Disney's catalog, you could probably find things in films that this is somewhat related to or somewhat similar to. But at the same time, watching this trailer, I'm like, this still doesn't feel like something that Disney has done a lot of other times before. Because again, a lot of times when I think Disney, I think musicals and stuff like that, right? But every now and then, you have something where it isn't a musical like Zootopia, Big Hero 6, which I have never seen, but you have this, and it's also got like that sci-fi adventure sort of appeal too. So it feels like not kind of like Treasure Planet, but I guess in like a similar vein as Treasure Planet, because again, non-musical, sci-fi adventure, that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely got Treasure Planet vibes, and I think that's kind of like what they were going for. And I think in general, this just looks beautiful. It looks gorgeous. I do, I like that it's going back to almost still a, what kind of one of the things I love about sci-fi is that it's the idea of exploring uncharted territories, exploring the unknown, exploring the new things that are out there in the universe that are so alien to us, but also so fascinating. And at the same time, it's not this, and not all sci-fi, but I think ideally and to a certain degree, you don't want to attack the unknown. You don't want to fight it or go to war with it. You want to explore it. You don't want to really understand it. And I think Strange Worlds kind of embodies that, which for me as a sci-fi fan, which is awesome. And then as someone who likes Disney animated movies too, to a certain degree.
To a certain degree, big emphasis on
but in general, this just looks like a very wholesome sci-fi adventure, and I'm happy Disney is doing that and exploring that. And of course, in general, it really does excite me.
And I'm happy that you mentioned you dug a little deeper into the whole idea of exploration and understanding the unknown, because another comparison that I read online that I think makes a lot of sense is that some people have compared this to the works of Jules Verne. I don't know if you've ever read any of his books, but one of my favorite books that I've ever read is Journey to the Center of the Earth. And when I thought about Jules Verne, that was the first book that I thought of. And another thing that seems to appeal to me, does appeal to me about the story, that's hypothetical speaking for myself. I like how you have multiple generations in this film, and how, like I said before in introducing it, they kind of have to put their differences aside. But I always love the idea of generations of a family facing something together, not to get too grim, but when everything happened with COVID and the pandemic and everything, looking back on that now that we're out of the pandemic, I look back and the idea of multiple generations of my own family facing off against this big thing. It was weird, as tragic as that was in a lot of ways. There's something that just felt very endearing about multiple generations of one's own family facing off against something. You know what I mean? It kind of makes you appreciate that bond even more. And obviously, you can't really compare a sci-fi adventure Disney film to a once in a lifetime pandemic so much, obviously, but just that idea of family facing off against something, really the unknown. There's just something that's just very touching about that.
Yeah, and even to that extent, also like even doing it together, like you're all not alone, and so again, this movie definitely fascinates me. I'm definitely interested. I remember when the teaser trailer came out, and I also had the same idea, mentality of like this just looks really fun, really cool, really engaging. And so I hope it lives up. I hope this is good.
Mhm.
I want it to be good. And again, the idea of just this sci-fi adventure of exploration, and etc. It's just that's what fascinates me the most. And almost going back to certain core and roots of the beauty of science fiction of that as a genre.
Mhm.
So I'm excited for
Yeah,
it.
actually, the more that I think about it and talk about it, like the more excited I get too. Because again, this movie seems to have a lot going for it so far. Of course, it's only just a teaser trailer, not so much a teaser trailer. It seems to be this is a full length trailer. But again, story, the animation looks gorgeous. The voice cast looks interesting too. Jake Gyllenhaal and Dennis Quaid. Dennis Quaid, I haven't heard much from him in a while, so that's gonna be cool to watch him. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this. This comes out in theaters on November 23rd of this year. And for all of you, what are your thoughts on the trailer for this film? Are you excited for the next Disney film? Leave your thoughts wherever it is that you can. Now, before we review or really dive into the next couple of trailers that came out of Netflix within the last few days, Avatar, the epic science fiction classic, was re-released in theaters this past weekend. Of course, this comes as Avatar: The Way, the Water, the sequel to that film, comes out this December. And for all of you that are unsure or like don't really remember exactly what Avatar is about, in the 22nd century, mankind colonizes the planet Pandora for a valuable mineral breeding tension with the Na'vi, the local humanoid population. A disabled Marine joins the Avatar program, which involves operating Na'vi-human hybrids in order to gain the trust of the Na'vi. Film stars Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana, Stephen Lang, Michelle Rodriguez, and Sigourney Weaver, and it's directed and written by the one and only James Cameron. Now, of course, this movie came out in 2009. I remember it being such a massive deal when it came out. And one of my biggest regrets as a moviegoer, as someone who's loved movies all of his life, was that I never saw Avatar in theaters when it first came out. So when I got I know, I'm shaking my head at myself too. So when I got that chance to see it in theaters, like when I found out that it was being re-released, I'm like, I need to get on this. I need to see it in IMAX. And we also end up seeing it in IMAX 3D accidentally. But now the big question is, again, this movie came out in 2009, such a massive deal, billions of dollars made over the course of like the last decade or so. Does this movie still hold up over a decade later?
Ooh, oh boy! Like this is like it's. I think that's a very important question because on multiple levels, you have a lot of movies that have come out even during that time, and when you rewatch them, they don't hold up too well, And I think I was just talking with you, Joe, like recently about this, about some of the movies that came out around the 2009, 2012 era, such as the first Avengers.
Mm.
And I even told you that I don't think the first Avengers. I might get slack for this, but it is what it is. I don't think the first movie holds up that well.
Wow, really? Actually, I do remember you mentioning that, but that is interesting. That is surprising.
Yeah, like the first Avengers. Personally, I don't think it holds up that well, and I can feel it through some dialogue, even some of the camera work, some of the visual effects. Like, I don't think it does. That's just my opinion. However, with Avatar, this movie really does hold up in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's a technical marvel, especially from when this movie came out. This came out 2009. Like, that's insane. The technology like has evolved over that time when it comes to visual effects and 3D work. And so like seeing what James Cameron was able to accomplish back then from a narrative perspective, a story perspective, a theme perspective, and again, some of that still holds up. Dialogue, not so much.
Yeah.
But just
glad you said it.
But just the technicality and the amount of effort and work that was put into this movie. And obviously, I'm not gonna say, and I know people are saying, "Oh, what about Avengers?" Like, no, both did, but I'm just saying, like for me at least, when it comes to just how it was all crafted together, and in the final product you see, I think it's on a whole different ball game compared to other films. Unfortunately, to a certain degree, sometimes, and it still holds up in a lot of different ways. And I gotta say, the visual effect and knowing how visual effects have evolved over time with the inclusion of the volume, the newest Unreal Engine that has been used in Mandalorian and etc. LED technology, how that evolved. I think now is honestly an even better time for Cameron to finesse and perfect what Avatar really, how he really initially saw Avatar.
Mm-hmm.
So, in seeing this movie, got me again. The emotions, the music, it still was there. So I'm equally, if not more, excited for Avatar: Way of Water now.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting that we talk about like how well this movie does hold up, and yes, in so many ways, this movie does hold up very, very well. Again, the biggest thing for me is really, you know, this is the quintessential James Cameron film. It's not his number one best film for me. That's still Titanic, but this feels the most like a James Cameron film. When I think of James Cameron, Avatar is the first thing that I think of, even before Titanic, because you could see the amount of care and attention and passion that he had for this film, and just how well it holds up over a decade later. The biggest thing that I always felt Avatar had going for it, other than, you know, the visual effects, which are groundbreaking. Visual effects wouldn't have moved forward if it wasn't for the path that Avatar, or the trail that Avatar blazed, you know, over a decade ago now. But the biggest thing for me is really just, again, how big the film is, you know, the epic scale and size and scope of this movie. And on top of that, like, it's not just like how big the movie is, it's how it pulls you in to that massive world. James Cameron's greatest gift as a filmmaker has always been that immersive, transportive quality. And other than maybe Titanic, no other film of his has really accomplished that like Avatar. You know, I've said 1,000 times on the show, the mark of a great job directing is when you feel like you're in the world of the film. You know, you're not just entertained by it. You don't just feel like it's happening to you. You feel like you're actually there. And Avatar, for that entire 2-hour and 42-minute runtime, I always felt like I was there. And on top of that, seeing it in IMAX, you know, I'm so happy that like I got into IMAX like within the last few years, because this is the quintessential IMAX film, or at least one of the quintessential IMAX films. So I'm so happy.
Definitely one of them.
That I got a chance to watch this, not just in theaters, but in IMAX. And, you know, funny enough, like I said, we accidentally ended up seeing it in 3D. And, you know, I'm kind of happy I got a chance to see it in 3D too. Unfortunately, there were a couple bits throughout like the 3D presentation where, like, you know, things just looked a little funky. So I don't think this film was filmed in IMAX 3D cameras, right? It was filmed in IMAX, it was filmed in 3D, but I don't think it was properly optimized for IMAX 3D, because I don't know if it was filmed in IMAX 3D cameras, right? Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I'm not entirely too sure on that. I remember, I think they said that they filmed in IMAX, but I'm not sure about IMAX 3D. But yeah, definitely IMAX is for sure they filmed.
But yeah, but other than that, you know, like I said, there's still so much about this movie that holds up. You know, the scale, the action. You know, I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, the movie, you know, the movie's going. It starts out, and I'm like, all right, this, you know, it's still really cool, still this sense of awe and wonder. But like, okay, half an hour in, like, is this movie still going to hold up? When that first chase scene, after they're exploring Pandora, and Jake is being chased by, I don't remember the name of like that, you know, big predatory creature, and you know, as that's going on, like, you know, he's like the monster like tearing through the walls as Jake's like, you know, barely struggling to get through and like fight it off in a way. I'm like, yeah, this movie still holds up. Like, I still felt like that. You know, I felt my stomach like jump up and down, like as that scene was playing out, between, you know, just like the editing and like the action and the sound too. Oh my God, this movie, just from a sound perspective too, because like anytime we think of Avatar, we think of the visuals first, right? Because again, groundbreaking visuals. Of course, you would think of that first. But it was one thing that I saw during that action scene, and really during all the action scenes too. Like, so much went into the sound of this movie too. Again, this just goes back to what I was saying about like the care and attention and dedication that James Cameron had when putting this film together.
Absolutely, like this man, he's quite the perfectionist sometimes. You know, it just goes to show like how much attention to detail he's willing to put into this. You know, and like I said, this movie still holds up in so many ways. Action, as you said, you know, still stellar to this day. And even watching this action and comparing to other action movies, this still feels even more engaging than other action movies sometimes.
Yeah.
like that one scene again. We've all seen it. It's gonna be spoilers. With that one scene where he was getting his first, quintessential dragon in a sense.
Yes.
And then that flying scene, just that entire sequence just felt so immersive, and especially when you later get closer as they're diving down, and you just hear like the oh my god, it just feels like I'm there. And like I said, Avatar still holds up. Still love this movie. One of my favorite sci-fi movies still. And like I said, I'm equally excited for Avatar Way of Water, and honestly, even the third one.
Yeah, well, we have to see how Way of the Water actually turns out, but yeah, I'm very much in the same boat as you. I still love this movie. I definitely don't regret spending nearly 3 hours, rewatching this old movie, because again, like so much of it still holds up very well for this movie. Even for the story too, I feel like the story and the writing gets knocked for this movie, maybe a little bit more than it deserves. Yeah, dialogue, still a bit clunky in certain regards, but as far as the story, is it technically Pocahontas in space? Kind of, yeah. Does that bother me? Honestly, with how they went about it, no, it really doesn't.
No.
So there's still, again, I still cared about what was going on, with the characters and everything. Thematically, there's a lot there that I think is handled fairly well. I think people have said that the themes are maybe a little bit heavy-handed. I mean, I can see that argument, but again, how they went about that with the themes and everything didn't really bother me. Performances, I think by and large are still there. Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana, I think is terrific, and I even loved Stephen Lang as a villain. He was one of my favorite. He was probably he might have been my favorite performance in this entire film. I really, really liked what they did with him, and how what he brought to everything. So for all of you, how do you think Avatar holds up after all these years? And do you plan on seeing The Way of the Water when it comes out in theaters this December? Leave your thoughts wherever it is that you can. And if you like more trips down, cinema memory lane like this one, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to get all notifications, whether you're on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, before we review the new scandal-plagued film, Don't Worry, Darling, we had not just one, but two Netflix trailer, at least two Netflix trailers, two that we actually feel like talking about on the show today, debuted this last week or so. And Darius, what was you were the one that really sent these my way. You seem to be more interested in talking about them than I do. What exactly drew you to them, and basically what are they about really? They clone Tyrone, and so let's start with that one.
Yeah, so the two things that I saw that had trailers and everything were I found interesting were The Watcher, which was a mini, almost, it felt like more of a thriller where you have this family that moves into this house and they're then notified that someone is just watching them because they're in that specific house. So throughout the series, it's why is the house important? Why are they being watched? Why so many different things going on that it intrigued me, and I was like, this seems different. It seems like, if to me it reminded me of a psychological killer, but then he doesn't want to kill. He just wants to watch. He doesn't want to kill just yet. Yeah, it's he really wants to be that predator in a sense where it's I'm just gonna watch you for a long ass time until I make a decision. And so it felt really interesting in that way. It also felt very unnerving when I was watching the trailer.
Same here.
I was like, geez, they're really going in on this, man. And I was like, I'm interested. It got me to the point where it's I'm interested. I'd be willing to actually sit down and watch this.
Yeah, same here. Something that's weird about the story, when I was watching this trailer, I kind of got a sort of supernatural vibe from it. I'm probably wrong in that, but there's just something that felt very supernatural about it. Probably about the way that the quote, the Watcher, the stalker, was talking. There's just something in his voice that made me feel like there was something otherworldly about this. But again, that could probably just be audio distortion, being used to, again, harass the family and everything like that. But this does look really cool. And you think to yourself, again, you have this guy stalking and, watching you and your family. What do you do? Do you run away, or, do you basically stand and fight? And the wife in the series, or at least in the trailer, says basically the same thing. She asked the same question: are we just gonna teach our kids that every time someone terrorizes them or comes up to them, they're just gonna run away? So it really is interesting too. There's a real moral dilemma there. There's the easy thing, and then there's the worthwhile thing to do, the satisfying thing to do, and possibly even the right thing to do depending on how you interpret it. So I'm looking forward to seeing like how exactly they execute that. But another thing too that says the cast of the series looks really interesting too. Bobby Cannavale, you know, I think he's you and I were talking about underrated actors before we started recording the show, and I think Bobby Cannavale is definitely one of them. He's done a lot of work. He's got like a big range, big variety of things that he's done. You know, he was in The Other Guys, and he was hilarious in that. He was also in The Irishman. You know, it was pretty fairly different in tonality for both of them.
Yeah, and again, the second I saw him too, I was like, "Oh snap, he's in this." That actually got me a bit more interested in wanting to see, because I do like him as an actor. So the show definitely seems interesting. I think Netflix has a lot. Like, they're just doing a lot. They're putting out a lot. They're doing a lot, and this one struck my eye. So
another thing that stood out to me too, other than, again, not just the rest of the cast, Naomi Watts, Jennifer Coolidge, Mia Farrow, that's a name I haven't heard in forever. This is the same creative team behind Glee and that miniseries that came out a while ago, Hollywood. Ian Brennan and Ryan Murphy. I'm like, these are guys that made Glee? This feels so different than that too. Like, talk about having range, like, as an artist and as a creator too.
Yep. So yeah, this definitely intrigues me, and I'm curious to watch it when it comes out. And then the other trailer was they cloned Tyrone with Netflix. And again, and what intrigued me about this one, and it looks like it's a group of ragtag people that are trying to uncover a conspiracy about, I guess, a larger like a governmental body or a company kind of cloning people or something like that. It's still, the story elements still aren't entirely there, so it's unsure. But from the title, they cloned Tyrone, I'm guessing there's some sort of cloning involved. But what intrigued me and what struck me the most was just the three actors already. John Boyega, absolutely great. Jamie Foxx, enough said, just Jamie Foxx. And Teyonah Parris, and we got to see her in WandaVision, Candyman. Yeah, I think she's great. I was going to
say, she looks so familiar, and I'm like, oh wait, that's Monica Rambeau.
Yep, and so, like, three great, like, black actors. I'm saying it. I'm excited. But yeah, like, all three of them, like, they each have their own, especially when throughout their career, like, you know, they have their own, like, style, they have their own, presence to the screen, and so seeing how all three are going to share the same screen, I'm really interested in this film. Is funnier than I thought. Jamie Foxx's character, Jamie Foxx, man, holy cow.
Yeah, there's something about, like, the tone that I see with this too, because the story is what I meant to say. The story feels very dark and mysterious, but at the same time, when you look at the tone, what we're seeing so far too, there's something that feels like much lighter and comedic about it, so I think that'll be an interesting mix. I want to see how they go about that. So far it doesn't feel cheesy, you know what I mean? Like, I'm still kind of felt like on edge, like I'm still very much curious, but I'm like, this will probably be fun too. And it's funny enough that you mentioned, like, going back to the whole cloning aspect of this, like, of course, like, it's definitely fairly obvious in the trailer that, like, okay, that just has to do with the cloning, everything like that, it's that sci-fi element, but I'm curious as to why. Why are they cloning it? And I think that's one of those things that really set me off with this trailer too. Like, I'm curious as to what exactly they're going to uncover and how they're going to handle it when they uncover it.
Yeah, like, it got me thinking, because, like, even certain lines of dialogue kind of implies that it's not one person. It's more than one person. So it's kind of like, all right, what's the intention? Are they targeting maybe a group of people or whatever? Why are they targeting that group? So I think there's a lot of questions still there. But again, it's at the point, for me at least, I'm intrigued. This is I definitely want to see it. Like, this is a for sure. I definitely need to see this, because again, I love all three actors. I like the kind of story it is with, or like, the concept with cloning, that sci-fi element. And of course, some of the lightheartedness and comedic stuff, especially from Jamie Foxx and even Teyonah Parris, which was shocking. So it's great to see, all these different things coming together, that to the point where, for me, I'm just like, you got three great black actors. I'm in. Oh, cloning. All right, I'm in. It's like, I'm just like, I'm in.
So for all of you that are still with us, like, what do you think about They Clone Tyrone? Are you actually looking forward to seeing it? I think it'll be, again, just like a good time, just sitting at home watching Netflix. And for all of you, if you want more trailer reactions like what we did for this one and for The Watcher, you know what to do. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, wherever it is that you can, whether on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And now to cap off the show, we're going to be reviewing Don't Worry, Darling. Now, there's so much that seems to be surrounding this movie. Everyone's talking about this, and there are multiple reasons as to why, both in and out of the film. The film follows a 1950s housewife living in an experimental utopian community and how she begins to unearth disturbing secrets about the town. The film stars Florence Pugh, Harry Styles, Olivia Wilde, and Chris Pine, and is directed by Olivia Wilde. Oh, man.
Woof.
Like I said, there's so much that seems to be surrounding this movie, but for now, at least for the time being, let's just stick with the movie itself. It's the story. You know, I feel like there were a lot of things that they were going for with the story that were interesting. There are definitely certain themes and undertones in there that I caught, but more so with the story, there were a lot of ideas there. Unfortunately, you know, as interesting as, like, you know, the first two acts are, with how, again, the story moves and how it's executed, it's enough to keep my attention. I was definitely engaged. The problem is with certain reveals and certain twists and how, you know, everything comes together, or really how everything doesn't come together at the end. That's where this movie falls apart. There was, again, just like there was how everything culminates in that last act or so. I don't know, just didn't really work for me. And how there were so many things that they were trying to go for it that just didn't connect in the end. This movie felt very, very disjointed.
Yeah, it definitely, even for me, and, you know, I was mentioning it to you, Joe, where, like, I think the first act I really liked. I was engaged, I was interested. And, you know, throughout the film, you're just like, all right, you don't really get a sense of where they're going just yet. And I think that was also a problem with the movie, where it felt like, all right, there is an idea, but the ideas just aren't. It's not stringing together coherently, and it really fell apart towards the end. You know, like you said, when it came to certain reveals and revelations and twists that made the even first two acts and the stuff beforehand even more questionable, because it felt like as if they kind of also broke their own rules and a certain rule set that they gave themselves.
Yeah.
That was established very early on, to the point where, again, that third act, to me, it really made the movie fall apart almost completely. And it felt like they were trying to... the third act felt very rushed. Very rushed into trying to pick up the pieces, or at least trying to put things together, but they're still unraveling everything. And it's just like, this felt very messily handled from, again, because it's like throughout the entire movie I was enjoying it, I was liking it, I liked some of the concept. I was like, all right, this is interesting, all right, I see where they might be possibly doing things, but then that third act, it was just like, what the hell is this?
Yep. And it's interesting because, again, the world that was built was interesting, and I thought that was cool. The problem is it didn't all make sense.
Yeah.
You know, I think if anything, like, I don't think this movie fails from a directing point of view, because there are a lot of scenes, again, like, I was interested, I was engaged throughout. There was a lot of great tension and great mystery that was felt, you know? But the problem is, again, I think it's just more from a writing perspective too. That's where this movie fails. But sticking with the writing, you know, there's, like I said, themes and undertones. Like, you know, people have argued that, like, oh, this is very much a feminist movie, this is feminist propaganda, and I could definitely understand that argument. It didn't really feel quite like propaganda. It felt more like an undertone than anything. I didn't feel like it was smacking me over the head with any sort of, you know, thematic ideas. But, like, that definitely feels like, you know, a sort of antithesis, or really criticism of, like, you know, the conformity of the 1950s and, like, that sort of nostalgia that came along with it. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, like, some of the the undertones were definitely there. I didn't feel like, as you were mentioning, the whole feminism thing, I was like, I didn't really get that at all, really. Like that's just, like, I just didn't get that. I just got a sense of, this is the story in the world that they crafted. And even certain comments I think the director made about the villain of the movie, I thought was very inaccurate too.
Yeah, like, let's dive into that for a quick second now. Of course, one of the players in this film is one and only Chris Pine. He does a great job. He gave my favorite performance in the entire film.
Oh yeah.
Olivia Wilde, for whatever reason, decided to talk out of her ass and really compare him to Jordan Peterson. I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, it's an interesting comparison. And I'm like, all right, if I watch this film, am I really going to see it? So I was that's one of the reasons I saw this film too. I'm like, okay, as someone who's watched a few Jordan Peterson clips here and there, does this really add up? Does this really make sense? And after watching this movie, Olivia Wilde was definitely talking out of her ass because I did not get any sort of Jordan Peterson vibes at all. And again, he was an interesting villain. Chris Pine gave a great performance, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So again, I think it was one of those things where, like, again, Olivia Wilde just said that in order to just get more attention for herself and for the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially how his character, and again, this goes down to the revelations too at the end. His character, his motives are very different too. Like there's also, it's not necessarily what I didn't expect, but again, that comment of the whole Jordan Peterson thing, and then the certain actions that Chris Pine's character has made, especially towards the end, made me be like, not really. And then to the other degree of like, interesting they go in this direction with his character. I like it, but it just didn't do it for me, especially towards the end. Again, the ending for me was the biggest, for me, it went from, all right, cool, all right, okay, and it didn't go slowly down, it went straight down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really wanted it at least to be better. I think there are a lot of things going for it. I think the direction of it was very interesting. But it also, the writing just felt inconsistent, and especially, like I said, but yeah, I wish it was better. That's the thing. I really did wish it was better.
Yeah, I feel like this had a lot of potential. I was very intrigued, when I first saw the trailer, but it just fell flat in a lot of ways. I mean, performances were fine, but like I kept seeing the particular actors and actresses instead of the characters themselves. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Anytime that, I saw someone on screen, the characters didn't really feel super well developed. Again, the only one character-wise that I had any sort of interest in was really Chris Pine's character. That's really it. Florence Pugh and Harry Styles. Florence Pugh was solid. Harry Styles was okay. Olivia Wilde, more or less in the same boat as the other two. Chris Pine, if you ask me, is a standout performance in this film. But this movie's well made too. But if anything, like before we really wrap this up, like I just wondered too, like, are the behind the scenes drama, is the behind the scenes drama that came along with this film more interesting than the film itself? You know what I mean? There's a lot of mystery there. There's like that alleged blowout argument on set between Florence Pugh and Olivia Wilde because, Florence Pugh allegedly got tired of Harry Styles and Olivia Wilde disappearing together from set.
Ooh.
The crew disputed. That's the thing now. The crew released a joint statement, really disputing that report of a blowout argument. But I don't necessarily believe that. Tempers flare on movie sets all the time. There's always a lot of drama. Got a lot of big egos clashing. A lot of people just like not knowing exactly what the fuck they're doing or forgetting like why they're there. There's that video of Harry Styles apparently spitting on Chris Pine. I'm thinking to myself like, is that really a thing? But then I watched the video. I'm like, it kind of looks like he kind of did, based on Chris Pine's reaction, like Harry Styles' movement overall. But so
oh boy,
there's just so much. There's just so much to unpack with this film. But I think we're just gonna leave it there. We're just gonna wrap it up from there. Maybe there are just certain cans of worms that just don't deserve to be opened so much. For all of you, what are your thoughts on Don't Worry, Darling? And not just the film, but the spectacular behind the scenes drama as well. Leave your thoughts wherever it is that you can. And I just want to ask, it's really, really curious. Did you enjoy our review? If you did, I can't imagine why you wouldn't. But if you did, subscribe, hit the bell to get all notifications for more just like it. And just like that, that's all we have for you today. As we go throughout the next week, we'll be revealing exactly what it is that we're talking about for the next week after that. So stay tuned for that. And we'll see you all next week. Take care.